Like the more we do on one side for value creation, right, the more diversity we can bring there, the easier we make that capability, the more value gets funneled into the ecosystem, the more people we're going to unlock.
GM, and welcome to the Boonafide Experience podcast. I am your host, Kyle, but really, most people, they just call me Boona. This is a Web3 podcast that curates the stories of artists, collectors, and true visionaries pushing the boundaries of technology to create a brighter future for all. That was Alex Zinder on what it's going to take to get the masses to adopt crypto. Alex is the head of enterprise at Ledger, a hardware wallet that many of you all should have. And I have two of them. And before we get started in the episode, this was recorded pre FTX meltdown and collapse. I think this episode is very perfectly timed given the current state of the market and furthers the bull case of not your keys, not your crypto. So Alex and I get in, we go into a little bit of background about where Alex came from, how he came to Ledger, some of the steps that brought him here and his fascination with the industry, how Ledger attacks education and how we both approach onboarding, how Ledger builds tools for retail versus enterprise, the comparison of crypto markets as a whole to the original capital markets and how the original capital markets were formed, which is quite interesting. Ledger security in your phone? Question mark. And lastly, we wrap it up with what it will take to get the mass to adopt crypto. Y'all, I am so excited for you to get into this episode. None of what Alex or I talk about here should be relied upon for financial advice. Let's go ahead and get started with the show. GM, Alex, how are you, man?
Doing well. How about yourself?
That's good. Today, I think I tweeted out today, my schedule is podcast, haircut, Call of Duty, and World Series baseball. So
I'm jealous. I'm very jealous. My schedule today, I think, was customer calls, early morning strategy session, budget, podcast.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad to be ending it on a good note, right? Well, for those who just want to let you give a brief intro, man, Alex, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I'm a techie. I spend most of my career in software. At Ledger, I'm responsible for Ledger Enterprise. So we have, at Ledger, we have two primarily focuses. We have Ledger for the retail audience, which we're incredibly well known for. The company has been in the business for about 8 years. The Ledger Nano has been the most successful hardware wallets, the best known, and that's what the company is really fundamentally known for. We continue to drive that business, but we've also been evolving a lot of different capabilities in the enterprise space, in the B2B space. And what we do there is fundamentally very straightforward. We work with large organizations to help them serve retail audiences that are interested in crypto, which has been pretty rewarding for us because it helps the ecosystem overall, right? Like you can't continue to scale the retail audience if you don't bring them the services that they need and want, and if you don't do that, securely and predictably. And that's really our primary objective at Enterprise. So here I'm responsible for the business unit. I also do a bit on platforms, so kind of the wallet strategy across the organization. Prior to Ledger, I've had a couple different functions. I'm American, living in Paris, which has been quite interesting for me.
Sure.
And the majority of my previous career, I was in capital markets, financial services. So I was with NASDAQ for 12 years before that in New York, where I was responsible for primarily focused on emerging tech. And that's how I really got into the crypto sector. So a lot of distributed systems, a lot of predictive analytics, distributed compute, cloud, and then Bitcoin started to come around. We were very much focused on DLT, right, distributed ledger technology. And then I spent close to 5 years, pretty much banging my head against the wall and trying to gain adoption, right, at the enterprise level, at the institutional level, which was fun. And then, 2 years ago, I think I kind of made the final decision that I was done trying to get adoption going at large organizations. And it was time to try my hand at disruption and dive into a crypto native org. Ledger came knocking, and it's been a trip ever since. Quite enjoyable.
That's quite the experience. Except for the 5 years of banging your head on the wall, that's trying to trying to yell into the void of people who just don't see it. It's challenging, and I'll tell you, as someone who, I've been in the crypto. So just to give you a brief synopsis of
please.
like my experience here is that I came in here right around the Beeple sale back in March of 21. So before that, I wasn't really even crypto, like I wasn't even curious about it. I didn't really see a use case, in my opinion. I know there were, but I just didn't see it before NFTs. A lot of the cultural artifacts and programmable smart contracts, and that's really what got me super excited about this, and the fact that you could attach something emotional to something that was inherently non-emotional. And that to me was like, this could be the cultural layer of crypto. And this is the part that I want to play in. But I'll tell you, when I first found out about it, I texted the only friend that I that could have known what the hell I was talking about. I didn't really understand how to articulate my thoughts in the beginning. I didn't understand how to, drive a conversation around asking questions around, really how onboarding is supposed to be done, in my opinion. In the beginning, I just shouted at them. And they left way more confused than when I first started talking to them. And so over time, I started to refine my approach and realize that, onboarding can only really, at least for me personally, because it's my belief that we're still so early, is that it has to be done with only people that I know, because I know what their interests are. I can tailor an experience to them. I can tailor a very plausible what if where it makes sense to them and they can get some buy-in, but yeah.
100%, and I agree with you tenfold, right? So we're firm believers in education, and we have a wide range of different education programs that we continue to deploy and evolve. But one of the biggest challenges, I think, for me, coming from the financial sector, is that you don't have a market segment to address, right? It's incredibly bespoke, right? Even the user base comes from all different walks of life, perspectives, different reasons, right? So it's a very interesting, super dynamic, and an extremely complex ecosystem. And it really is more an art than a science as to how do you position yourself as a company, right? Like, how do you create value? Who's your audience? And I think, to your point, being able to, to take the right stance for crypto and how the ecosystem as a whole evolves, and how do you engage with the various communities in this space. It's been super interesting for me. And then the next challenge is, how do you work with other companies and organizations that have something of value? They know how to build, they know how to create value, but it's such a long bridge to get from the standard value creation mechanisms that we're accustomed to, right, in Web 2 and kind of existing systems, to how do I create something that's going to be valuable to thousands of different communities that are evolving there. And none of those communities has the hundreds of millions of users, right? They're all couple 100,000, couple thousand, but in totality, right, the ecosystem is huge, but it's super fragmented. It's an extremely interesting problem set, and I think Ledger, in my personal opinion, and one of the reasons that I'm here, does that extremely well, because they've been early, and the brand is associated with security, self-sovereignty, and kind of betting on yourself, right, as an individual at the end of the day, and that seems to really resonate with the wider audience of crypto, and not necessarily each individual community.
Dude, there's a lot. That was beautifully said. There's a lot that I want to touch on here, but and coming from the retail side, I mean, I own 2 Ledger Nano X's. So one because I knew it's what needed to happen. But number 2, I got one of those crypto tag, and this is not a sponsored podcast, by the way, but I bought one of those crypto tag thing where it's the steel plate to put in your seed phrase. And I did the whole ritual of that, where when I wrote it down, after I did it, I actually burned the card to where it was only in the crypto steel plate. But I'm like, there's always this looming question: did I do it right? Did I put it in right? Is this like, what if I had to put in my seed phrase, and then all of the valuable assets I put in my hardware wallet are gone? And so I actually bought another ledger just to just as a backup, to make sure that like I had it right. I'm like, okay, now I can breathe. I'm good. But it's a whole different learning curve, and something that like I really would like to know a little bit more about, is that, because on the personal level, this is now, there are a lot more resources today than there was back in 2021.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot more disingenuous people in the space than there were in 2021. So I know how long it took for me to even get to the point where I felt comfortable just purchasing Ethereum on Coinbase. And I gotta imagine persuading companies who don't really like trying to convince companies at that scale has got to be one of the biggest challenges. So one thing I wanted to ask is like, what's been the biggest pushback, or kind of how have y'all approached strategy when it comes to these larger companies? Because the individual level is just, quite frankly, it's really fucking hard to do.
No, I love the question. And first of all, thank you for being a customer and a user.
Yep.
We're always very, very thankful. And then I think you kind of phrased it extremely well and eloquently. So I want to capture that, and I'll do a little bit of a sales pitch, just a small one, but I think I'll get it out of the way, and then that'll be it. But you framed it very well, right? Because on the individual side, on the retail side, right? You go through this experience, and you said you had like your own little ritual, right? That you do to set yourself up. We call that a ceremony. So we also have a word for it, right? But there is a threshold. There is a tangible barrier to entry, right? And frankly, there's two dimensions to that. So Ledger's primary role and responsibility as a company, right, is to make sure that barrier to entry is as small as possible. Right. So we want the user experience, right, and the individual experience to be as frictionless as possible. So we gain adoption into crypto, right? That's the number one priority, hands down. Now, there is a balance there, right? Because you don't want to also completely remove the ritual, right? Because there is a certain value. It's special, right? Like there's a certain value associated with, it's a common bias called a continuity bias, right? Like once you do an investment, right, then you start to justify that investment you use. So it's a common human trait. And it's not, it's not manipulation. It's just how we behave as humans. But at the same time, that barrier to entry is associated and is there because of the security element, right? So if you want self-sovereignty, if you want self-custody, if you want control of your own digital identity and digital assets, there is a price to pay, right? Like there is a certain thing that you have to do that you didn't have to do when you didn't care about those things and you were delegating that to Coinbase or to somebody else to do it for you, or just like you do today with a bank, right? So, and it's an important thing to capture, right? Because it's now, it is a different model. And I also appreciate like the level of awareness that you had, that, right? You had to back it up, you had to think about it. Now, and it's challenging, right? It's rewarding, but it's challenging. And then the way we think about it on the enterprise side is you take that problem set from an individual perspective and you look at it from a team's perspective, right? So now what if there's 5 people, right, that are required to manage processes related to, and I'm not sure how crypto wealthy you are, but think about, there's 500 million on the account, right? Or a couple billion on the account. Right. And you have a team of operators that are actually, managing processes related to moving these assets on a daily basis. Right. And the thing that people don't always realize about crypto, which is an important distinction, is, Ledger does hardware wallets and we do hardware, and that's associated with cold storage, which is important. You need to protect your keys, right? So nobody can take your keys. But most of the attacks that we see and most of the compromises that we see in the ecosystem today have nothing to do with somebody stealing your keys. Majority of them have to do with man-in-the-middle attacks, social engineering, phishing attacks, where you're signing something with your own keys, but what it is that you're signing isn't actually what you think you're signing.
That's right.
So it's manipulation of the actual payload itself. So Ledger is important in that regard because we see that we have a secure device and a secure screen that you can validate exactly what you're signing. We take that same model and we'll apply it to organizations where we have full what you see is what you sign capabilities for secure governance. So every time an operator approves a transaction or validates it in any way, shape, or form, we give them a full secure view on the display using our own hardware, which is the differentiator. And that's the premise. We kind of take that single pain point, that individual experience, and we allow companies to scale that out. So we wrap a SaaS-based platform around that. So you got seamless user interfaces, full dashboarding, full reporting capabilities. All your governance is taken care of. And then on top of that, we build a flexible workflow with the hardware device to be able to then enable an operating team at scale to manage crypto assets.
Gotcha. So that's super in depth. Thank you for that explanation. The question I have also from that is like when I was looking at the website of like Ledger Enterprise, what companies are you typically targeting? What companies have an interest for this? Like that was the big question. I'm like, is it just a bunch of people building an NFT project? Because I saw that you had that. I'm like, that's cool, but surely this is much bigger than that.
Right.
So I'd like to like broaden my scope a little bit here just to understand that.
No, totally. And I think it's a great question. And I would say, I'll go back to my previous statement as, it's a diverse ecosystem, right? Yeah. So it is very difficult to find the right market segment and be like, all right, like this is our box, like this is what we optimize for. So what we really have to do is we have to partner and we have to build. So I think of Ledger Enterprise as a toolkit. A toolkit and a capability and a knowledge base to do solution engineering with our partners. Right. Okay. So there's probably, three things that we do fundamentally better than anybody else in this space. Security, protecting your keys, secure governance, giving you that secure workflow capability on top of your key management, right? And then just general crypto savvy ability to introspect the blockchain, gather the data, present it in the proper way, understand market movements, advise, build solutions. So we use those capabilities to build point solutions for specific use cases with our clients as it evolves. And, there's really been a pretty interesting movement in the ecosystem, which we were very much exposed to. So Ledger Enterprise, we've been around for about 4 years. We laugh that we're kind of the best kept secret of Ledger because the brand is so strong with retail and the wallet, and Enterprise, hasn't been spoken about that much, primarily because we work with very large clients at very large asset allocations, right? So, over the 4 years, we've had assets on the platform in tens of billions. In crypto, we do, hundreds of billions in annual turnover on the platform, and we're growing quite rapidly. So it really started with crypto native players. So mostly custodians and exchanges. We have, we talk about two customers in general. So Crypto.com is a very large early stage client of ours. We've been working with them for many years. They've grown up with our platform underneath their exchange for custody. Kamainu, which is a well-known regulated custodian in London, is another long-term client and actually a joint venture between us, Numera, and CoinShares. And they've been with us for a long time and also built a solution on top of our platform. And that's how we learn and evolve the technology and build the different tool sets. And we've seen a tremendous amount of adoption over that time in crypto native financial institutions. We have neobanks using the platform. We have other custodians, other exchanges, but mostly focused on securing your assets. Right. Sure. That was the primary value proposition. In the last 2 years, we've seen a very strong shift from securing your assets to a wide explosion of different use cases.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, which has been incredible for us because it really makes you take a step back and think, okay, like, well, what do we do, right? Like, where do we focus? Where do we invest? We always have engineering resources that are constrained, right? And the shift for me has really been from let's make sure we protect the Ethereum and the Bitcoin as you manage it, to what do we do with our assets? How do we interact with these distributed ecosystems in a wide range of different ways? So the explosion in DeFi has been super interesting. We have a smart contract interaction framework that we've put in place with the same governance controls that allow our customers to be able to interact with any smart contract in the ecosystem, be able to see what that smart contract does. You can whitelist your smart contract addresses so you can really protect and manage the risk as you do that, because as you know, a lot of these smart contracts also do get compromised. There's been quite a few challenges in that regard. We are working actively on NFT use cases. We've launched Ledger Enterprise Create early last year.
I saw that.
Yeah, and that's gotten a lot of traction, actually.
Okay.
And fundamentally, the principle doesn't change. It's security, it's governance. For the NFT use cases, we do treasury management, which is very important because to run NFTs, you need crypto. You need to be able to manage a treasury. And then on the tail of that, we also support all NFT use cases. So we allow you to create and manage your NFT smart contracts securely. We allow you to mint. We have full API support to automate some of these capabilities, right? And then we generally build with our customers and with our partners in that regard, because as you can imagine, the variability in the NFT use cases today is huge. And then many of our clients come to us and say, hey, we want to do something with NFTs. And when you ask, okay, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, well, we're not sure. We're going to figure it out together. And like, okay, sign us up. Why not?
Yeah. And that's the biggest part, that it's for me, it's hard to onboard people where we get them excited about this, but them to not, but also for me to help people understand that there is a big paradigm shift that needs to happen before you really start doing something. And it's really hard to get people to like take off the rose colored glasses for just a second, put the glasses on to bring them in, but then take them off to like, okay, now let's think about what we actually do with this. Because the one thing that I always get turned off by, whether it's a company, whether it's a project, whatever the case may be, is that it's Web 2 values wrapped in Web 3 technology, right? Like that's where it's like I for the people who are doing something that are truly innovative to see, okay, how can we use smart contracts to give back to the original community? How can we use some of these tools and protocols to actually enrich the experience in a way that's never been done before? Or a different way that it solves a problem that we've been looking to solve for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, right? So that's a lot of the use cases that I see that are super interesting. Now, one thing that you touched on that I wanted to just expand on is that it's really cool the way you guys are looking at as it more of like a partnership versus like we're going to sell you a product. Because I see that also that same approach being taken with Polygon, with Fwiz being at the helm, and one of my favorite people here. And the way he's approaching that is like game studios aren't just going to like full on adopt this technology, and they don't know who to hire. They don't know like what's legitimate, what's not, and there's no strategy behind that. So I think it's a really cool thing to see larger companies kind of taking more of like a, hey, we have the resources. We're not gonna we're gonna keep these guys here, but we're gonna partner with you to build something cool versus you just kind of siphoning off our talent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%. And then for me, like that's hugely rewarding just as an individual. And this is the type of engagement that I want to be able to have. So we support Polygon on the platform. We support the NFT use cases around Polygon. And I think, kind of to expand on my previous kind of trend over the last 4 years, frankly, I think this recent market contraction is actually doing good things for
I'd agree.
For the entire ecosystem. I mean, it's not super pleasant, right? I think it hurts everybody to a certain extent, but there's good things. There's a silver lining. And the way my party line recently has been that the observation is that we're moving from speculation. There's been a lot of speculatory activities, right? And a lot of growth and movement in those speculatory activities, which, by the way, I come from, a capital markets background. Speculation is good. Like there's nothing wrong with speculation. It helps create efficient markets, right? Like, you need speculation, right? It's an important part, but you shouldn't lead with speculation. And that's where the crypto ecosystem has been a little bit different from the traditional kind of finance, right? In traditional finance, first there were railroads, right? Then there was hotels. So there was huge projects that required funding that then created the genesis for the markets and the capital markets that we see today. But first there was the value creation. In crypto, we were a little bit twisted, right? First there was speculation, speculatory activities. There was a boom in DeFi. And now we're seeing that slow shift from speculation to value creation. And to me, that is hugely exciting because that's exactly where we want to be. And that's exactly where Ledger has positioned itself to be most effective. And that's why we want to work with our partners, right? For speculation, you give them a tool. It's quick time to market because you have about a six months to 12 months window before the network either stabilizes or disappears, right? And
Yeah.
so your monetization window is relatively low. You want to
Yeah.
quickly go to the market. You do your thing, and then you move on to the next one, right?
Right.
With value creation, you make an investment, you build. It's for longer periods of time. That's why we're super bullish on Ethereum. The merge was huge for us. Very happy that everything went well and that we're
Yeah.
progressing nicely on proof of stake. And EVM is basically kind of, for us, has been a big focus. We've fully committed and deployed staking solutions on Polkadot, Solana, Polygon, and Ethereum. Others coming quickly. And we're doubling down on NFT use cases. And the most beautiful thing, like this is the perfect synthesis of the two, and this is what I tell myself. This is why the strategy is working. We're working with a partner, a company. I don't know if you know them in the U.S. They've actually been getting quite a bit of publicity. A company called One Of.
I've heard the name, but I'll be frank with you. I'd be lying if I said I had a clue of what they did.
No worries. Check them out.
Yep.
Super exciting company. Focused on NFTs. Really interesting, strong backers. And we're working with them to develop their NFT use cases to give them a secure model for operating their drops. And at the same time, they're going to be getting Ethereum in that process, right? So they're going to need ETH or actually they're on Polygon and Ethereum both. They're going to get the crypto to fund the operations. They need gas. They need funding, and then secondarily, they're going to be receiving payments for their NFTs in crypto. So they're going to be having a treasury. And at the same time, as they're building their NFT portfolio and NFT capabilities, they're talking to us about, well, what do we do? Because we want to participate in the network. We want to stake, right? And we want to do it properly. And how do we develop that capability? So to me, it's like, that's the perfect example, right? One client creating value through NFTs, building real things for real communities, for a real audience, and then taking the proceeds from that and properly investing that into proof of stake, which is then also supporting the network itself and lets us generate a return on investment. Why not?
Why not? Yeah. I mean, it's part of it. No, I love that, man. That's really, one thing I took from this whole blurb is the interesting part. I always learn something from people who have done this longer than me, like yourself. And like, it's really interesting to hear around how capital markets are built. I had no idea that was like the foundation of what that was built on. It was railroads and hotels, which is what essentially created the need for a capital market. And here it's all speculation, and then it's value. So it's interesting how it's backwards, but it's really interesting how it still works. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't really need to follow one specific model in order to work here. Now, I'm going to change directions here a little bit. So the one interesting part, what made me really bullish on Ledger was hearing Ian Rogers' interview with Kevin Rose. And one of the questions that Kevin asked, and this is just the inner nerd of me that I just have to ask if this is something that y'all took away from this. So Kevin was talking about, Ledger, a lot of the hardware technology that's in these devices, it's incredibly secure. Do you guys see a moment or a time where this gets integrated into smartphones? Like, is this a point where like this becomes part of like our mobile devices and it becomes a part of some regular devices that we all use today?
I mean, I think, look, there's no conjecture there. Like, that's a natural progression, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting piece of this is, Ledger as a company came from one hypothesis. And the hypothesis was that when the first Nano was being designed here in Paris, the hypothesis was that the current state of the devices that we use for Web 2, right, our laptop or browser or cell phone, are not sufficiently secure to support the movement of value that we're going to see in Web 3. Right. So that was the very simple hypothesis. It was proven to be true, right? We sold over 5 million of those devices from that point on. And currently 15 to 20% of all crypto sits on a Ledger wallet. Which is a pretty significant percentage from an allocation perspective. So, that was the right hypothesis. We can now firmly say that. Obviously, there'll be more growth. That's great. But as there's more demand, right, as adoption continues to increase, there is going to be a trajectory from towards ease of use, right?
Yeah.
And now when we
Right.
say, what is the mission for Ledger? Like, what is our North Star? It's security, right? With the best possible user experience.
Mm.
Right. And to the
Yep.
extent that we can continue to deliver the security, right, at the same level, at the same threshold, and continue to improve the user experience incrementally as the surrounding technology ecosystem allows us to do, right?
Yeah.
That's the art. That's how you thread the needle, right? Is what is the current state of tech today? And how do you balance security with ease of use for any given point in time? Because honestly, on the adoption curve, crypto, we have 10, 20 years to go, right? As it continues to scale exponentially.
Right.
And in 10 to 20 years these days, the cycles of technology, the cycles of hardware, the cycles of, the capabilities on the chips and the types of displays and the types of devices that we're going to have in our hands, nobody knows, right? Like, how do you hypothesize around that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those questions that I had to ask because it raised my eyebrows a little bit when he pitched that idea. I said that sounds pretty neat because I still get very nervous like when even with MetaMask and everything and with Ledger Live on my phone.
Yeah.
It's still a question. It's still like a question that looms. It's still like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it, and to be honest with you, I'm just as much of a fanboy in that regard as you are. Like, Ian is incredible. Kevin was a longtime favorite of mine when I was spending a ton of time out in California. And the interesting concept for me is, and this is one of the reasons why I joined Ledger, and I was super excited to do so. I'm a software guy, right? Like, I've been building. I came up in the web bubble, right? So I kind of saw the evolution of the web space as my first job. And when I joined Ledger, I was looking at the technology stack. I was trying to look at the company and see how it would be working in this context. And I became very quickly aware that, honestly, this is the only experience, the only company that I've ever engaged with that does three things extremely well. Hardware.
Yep.
So every single hardware wallet that we've distributed so far is manufactured and put together in France in a very secure facility, hugely efficient. Like, it's incredible when you visit what they're able to do there. So the hardware aspect is locked up. And then we also do firmware, which is also critically important, very important to the point that you're making, because firmware can run on any hardware. And that's where the security really comes in, right? So the firmware aspect of it, so being able to write operating systems at the low level for the designated hardware on the chipset, it's very secure, with very secure practices. That's really the differentiator, because you can take that firmware and you can put it on a chipset inside a phone. You can put it on a chipset inside an IoT device. You can put it on a chipset inside a laptop, right? As long as it's compatible. And that capability, the ability to write your own operating system, so you have the end-to-end stack fully secure, that's unique. I have not personally encountered that anywhere else. And then we do software, right? And when you build software on your own firmware, the security constraints and the security concerns kind of float away, and you're able to be really free in the tool sets that you're building and the user experience that you're bringing to the user base, because the security constraint is already solved for with the firmware piece.
Got it. That makes a lot. Thank you for breaking that down. That was something that, as someone who loves the shiny new object, I'm a shiny new object syndrome guy, so it's nice to hear some of the inner workings of how this stacks on top of each other. You opened up a new perspective. Now, one thing that I know that, based on some of our previous interaction, or what I know from you, is that, we're both trying to onboard our parents. So I actually had, you'll probably enjoy this. So for the longest time, when I was podcasting, my parents really didn't understand anything of what was going on. They thought I was, playing with magical internet money that didn't really exist. And that these weird, JPEG, like tokens that point to JPEG things, they just didn't understand. Specifically around CryptoPunks. Like, I still can't convince my mom of why CryptoPunks are valuable. It's something that's completely lost on her. And I've given up on trying to explain it. But the point I'm making is that when I finally, made my first major flip, where I was able to, knock out a good size of debt that I had, that was when I started paying attention. And the last time I had a conversation with my mother was, okay, what's this wallet thing, right? Like we finally started to have the wallet conversation, and custodial versus non-custodial, and hot wallet versus cold storage wallet, and all of these things. And one of her takes was that she's like, I still don't understand any of this, all right? Like, but what I'm trying to do now is ensure that if this does become an investment, that our financial advisor says, hey, in 5 to 10 years, you need to put some assets here. I don't want to feel like I've just completely missed everything. So when it comes to having devices where our parents can access these crypto assets, how far of what kind of time horizon are you thinking for when it comes to that?
That's a great question. I guess it's a hard one to answer because I think it has to do with, and to me it really does have to do with the demand aspect of it, right?
Yep.
So the new adopter threshold that has to be overcome is different for every single person, right? So we have early adopters, right? You have late adopters, and that's a personality trait. Frankly, in my experience, some of it has to do with age, right? Because as we fill our heads over time with certain preconceptions, it gets harder to turn them over. But I've seen people, irrelevant of age, being able to pick up new things like that just because that's their mental states, and that's how they, that's how they deal with the world. So everybody has their own adoption cycle. But for me, what it really has to do is there needs to be a balance of value versus barrier to entry. Right. So it's a curve. It is a curve, right? As we increase the amount of value that we can bring to a wider range of users through crypto, right, that resonates with them. So for your mom, potentially, right, it's inflation, right? So how do I protect my life savings from the inflationary situation that we currently have in the traditional financial system, right? That might be the driver, right?
Yeah.
But what we need to make sure and do, and this is really kind of how I try to synthesize my job to myself, right? Is my job is to work with value creating organizations and teams to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for somebody to create that right point of value for your mom to say, oh shit, I need a nano.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a game of numbers, right? Like the more we do on one side for value creation, right, the more diversity we can bring there, the easier we make that capability, the more value gets funneled into the ecosystem, the more people we're going to unlock. Right. And it's a standard network effects model. And if done correctly, right, it will have multiplier effects as it starts to attract more and more, right? So there's a gravitational pull to this whole thing. And that's what really gets me, super excited to get up in the morning and come to work and have my early Asian client calls to be able to say, all right, like, what are we doing today to make it as easy as possible, not to only consume the value, but to actually create it and bring it to these networks. And that's not only companies on an organization, that could be individual creators that we work with, that could be small teams, right? But it needs to be able to scale, right? Because majority of the audience that's there, 95% of the retail audience needs scalable solutions because there's billions of them, right? And that's that's the game that we play every day.
Man, that sounds like a fun game to play, man.
I'm loving every day.
It sounds like something that's pretty endless. At least right now, when we still have so much legwork to do. That because like with me, that's what excited me about the space, is that the current model of Web 2 was the opportunity felt dried up. You know what I mean? And it just, all of the things that were value adds like 5 to 10 years ago they're just a common part of what we're doing, and so that's what I think excited me so much, is that there is actually so much work to do here, and there is so much opportunity if people would literally just step in and say, I want to do this, and watch the opportunity just surround them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's kind of the thing, right? And the diversity of use cases is really almost limitless in this case. Like I want my mom never to stand in a DMV line again. Right, because she can go on her phone, on her device, and securely through a website be able to renew her driver license, right? Because there's assurance between the two parts that she is who she is, and and there's a secure interaction that's being enabled, right? I don't want to stand in a passport line anymore, right? Like I want to come in, I want to, touch my secure device to the border system and walk right through, right? And these are just some of the more future looking use cases around identity that people are working on, but this is all within our grasp. And then something as simple as like if you're a coin collector or a stamp collector, right? Like it's fundamentally, right? This is what NFTs really are. It's a digitization of the collection ecosystem, which has been around for hundreds of years. But now there's open markets, and it's an easier way of collecting that's much more social.
It's a lot more fun too. I mean, I think it's the biggest element of what people like. When I first came in here, I didn't realize how much fun I was actually going to have. That it just the amount of people, the amount of brain activity that goes on here, and the amount of humor that's also combined with all of the good things that are happening here. That's, I think, what really made me the most excited. And like, to wrap things up though, to your point, like, I think, because some full context, I hadn't really experienced any financial markets on my own for the past, because the last time we were in a downturn of a market, I was still in high school, and that burden was on my parents. And they worked really hard to make it to where I didn't really feel any of the effects of it. I noticed a change in their mood. I noticed a lot of other things happening, but I was relatively unaffected. So this is actually my first time in a down market on my own completely. And so it's been a very interesting learning curve, because I've only known on my own up only just in general, not even crypto. Just it's been a healthy market, startups making, raising a lot of capital, doing good thing, all of this stuff. But then you throw in the madness and the insanity of 2021 of, NFT summer. It got to a point where I didn't really know what was going on, but there was something telling me that like, I'm just exhausted. This isn't sustainable. Like this has got to end. And I just said, man, there's so many grifters and there's so many just, disingenuous opportunists that are coming into the space right now. I cannot wait for a bear market. So I'm just like, man, give me some equilibrium, give me some balance. Like when the markets went to shit, there was this massive amount of pain and cope and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, when is this going to be over? But I feel like in the past 2 weeks to a month, crypto's kind of warped my time perspective. But it feels like we're at that stage where a lot of the people have exited, a lot of the pain has left, even though it's still painful, but there's a lot more good ideas. It's almost like people are like regrouping, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that observation. So I generally take a technical outlook to some of these things. Like as an architect, you always think about systems. And whenever you build a system at scale, you always have unintended consequences. Any self-regulating system is going to come with its own set of issues that you never anticipated or imagined. So to your point, all the hacks you're saying, all the all the manipulation that's out there, these are unintended consequences. So when you test a system, you have to put it in a situation of stress. You have to stress the system to test it. And generally speaking, if you design your system well, it'll start to revert to its intended state under conditions of stress. Which is kind of, I think, what we're seeing now, right? So we had this system, and these are all connected things, right? So, and kind of to map my own journey around this, and I think we have very relatively similar journeys, is, with Web 2, it was all about information. Right. So you can discover new things, you can learn, like you don't have to go to, Barnes and Noble to buy a book anymore. Right. You can do it online on your own time. And that increased proliferation of information, more people had access. That was great. And then we had crypto. Crypto did the same thing to value. Right. Like you no longer had to, sign into your E-Trade account or go to your bank. Right. You could, you could go to Coinbase, you can go to crypto.com, you can go to Binance and do it quickly and easily and in real time. Right. So that also, for better or worse, increased people's exposure to that model. And now you can take, if you were successful in that world, or, just figure it out your own way. Now you can go and, you can spend 10 Ethereum on an NFT, right? And where else, like in what point in time could somebody in our position be able to say that, look, I'm going to blow, 50K on a piece of art that I feel is important to me because of the community that I'm a part of, right? And the interactions I can have as a result, and use it as an avatar, right? Like it's a completely ridiculous concept. And then what's next? after that, which is super super cool and exciting times. And to your point, like we stressed the system over the last 6 months. But I think it's for me the takeaway is that stress is actually letting it show its true colors and the core intent and now the evolution of NFTs, the build out of the communities, and also the appetite for education, which is something that we're seeing go up quite a bit. People want to educate themselves. We have major players in the ecosystem saying, "Hey guys, look, systems that stress, we don't know what the unintended consequences are going to be. Protect yourself, go the self-custody route, right? Because then the only person you blame is yourself, right? Like when you have Coinbase publicly saying, get a nano, put your assets on there because we don't know what might happen to us tomorrow, right? And that's what the system, that's what, distributed ecosystems, that's what crypto was designed for, right? Is you take your own destiny into your own hands because you don't know what could happen to these systems that were designed by other people for other purposes.
That's a great point. And I just want to lastly touch on, I know this is a podcast about Ledger, but I enjoy how Coinbase is still sticking to a lot of the values that, like a lot of the crypto native values, even though they are a publicly traded company, they are they're doing what they have to do, but they're also still fighting really big battles. Like with the whole Tornado Cash sanctions, they're deploying a lot of efforts towards supporting that. I guess to provide, resources for the defense of that, which is a very big overstep in my opinion of the government on that one. But it's cool to, I say all that where it's like, even though they're in this position, they're like, hey, you still need to do this because not your keys, not your crypto. Like you need to do this just in case. Because at the end of the day, I learned this from one of my great mentors is that like a lot of this is still an experiment. This is it, although even though there's just massive amounts of value being transferred on a daily basis here, even in a downturn, it's still an experiment. Right. 100%. We still don't fully know it's going to work out. Right.
100%. Yeah. Belt and suspenders. Right. But you're never going to know. And we're big fans of theirs, quite frankly. And we partner up on multiple initiatives together. So we do have a common belief system in a lot of ways. So it's great to see, players be that successful and still keep to the general tenets and principles, which is hugely important.
Well, cool, Alex. This has been a treat, man. Thanks for hopping on, and thanks for accommodating the time zone.
Fantastic.
And yeah, this has been great, man. So, lastly, is there any place that if people wanted to follow your journey or get in touch with you, where people should go, or give a shout out to anywhere?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go to ledger.com, right? Very simple access point. Check us out. There's a ton of educational material out there. Please go get yourself educated. Watch our YouTube videos. If you're a company and you're listening to this, go to ledger.enterprise.com, right? It's as simple as that. Check us out. Drop us a note. We're always open to talk and build together. That's the primary objective. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been a blast. Really good way to finish off the week, and I'm gonna go and enjoy a glass of wine in Paris.
Do it, man. That sounds like a treat, man. But yeah, man, this has been phenomenal. It's a great chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I would love to do this again. This is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Y'all, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Boonafide Experience podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please go ahead and like and subscribe to this audio or video platform, whichever one you're on. Doing so helps get this podcast up to the top of the leaderboards and helps onboard the next wave of people that we need into crypto. If you really enjoyed the episode, please go ahead and leave a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. Apple and Spotify have that feature available now. And if you're on any other listening platforms, please go ahead and leave a review on my website, boonafide.com, along with your favorite part of the episode and any other additional feedback. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good one.